countdown to Armageddon. They're still squabbling in Washington. But guess what? The Democrats, instead of holding spending down, now say, we want freedom to spend more. We've got to spend more. They need a fix. It's like a heroin addict. You've got to have your fix, and they need a fix. So they want the sequester taken away as a price for reopening the government. It is shocking, Terry.
It is shocking, but honest at last, right?
Well, I don't know if it's honest or not. I mean, it's clouded in obfuscation, but go ahead.
Well, Republicans say that they're not going to go along with any plan that gets rid of spending cuts, and they say Democrats are going too far. Ephraim Graham has the story.
Senate leaders are taking charge of negotiations to end the government shutdown and avoid a default. But so far, they too have failed to agree on a deal.
We're in a free fall as Republicans, but Democrats are not far behind. And after listening to all of us talk now, I probably understand why 60% of Americans want to vote all incumbents out.
Republicans are no longer pushing to defund or to change Obamacare, but now Democrats are trying to limit the automatic sequester spending cuts as part of any deal.
So the plan would be open up the government immediately for a period of time before the sequester hits, and then have serious discussions where we might be able to undo the sequester.
If you break the spending caps, you're not going to get any Republicans in the Senate.
Republicans say undoing the sequester cuts would increase spending, a major step in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, the American people's patience is wearing thin over the politics of the shutdown. Hundreds of protesters calling themselves the Million Vet March removed barricades at several memorials and then marched over to the gates of the White House.
There's no middle ground, it seems like. That's the trouble. So the left hand doesn't want to talk to the right hand.
Fire them all.
Republican Senator Ted Cruz joined the crowd. He asked why the government was spending money during the shutdown to erect barricades to keep veterans out of memorials.
Our veterans should be above politics. Enough games.
Several protesters carried signs reading, "Impeach Obama." Police got involved, pushing the crowds back away from the White House gate. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Well, it'll get a lot uglier unless they do something. But I tell you, this is crazy. What we're looking at is a party of people who are spendaholics. $17 trillion in debt, ladies and gentlemen. It's insupportable. The interest on that debt is going to be mounting. It'll encompass the entire federal budget pretty soon. Something's got to be done. And the sequester, which was put in, I might add, because of a suggestion by the president. It was his, suggestion, and the Republicans picked up on it. That has been the most effective means of scaling back the reckless spending of our government that's taken place in decades. So the Republicans, they couldn't possibly give it up. If they did, they'd be insane. And they'd face an angry electorate when they get home. So they can't do that. And the Democrats should know they're not going to do that. But you've got about 3 more days to go before we have a default. It would rocket around the world. If we lose, ladies and gentlemen, I want to make this as clear as I can. If the United States loses its status as having the reserve currency of the world, it is going to mean chaos for every single citizen. It's going to mean the value of your pensions is going to go down. The value of your home will go down. The value of what you have to borrow is going to go up extraordinarily. You'll pay much higher interest rates. And from now on, the government won't be able to print money to pay its bill. It's going to have to come up with some, which means you're going to have much, much higher taxes. I mean, it's going to be chaotic. And these guys are playing games. And I hope the Republicans on this one will stand fast. They've got to stand fast and say no more. And I can't imagine the members of the House of Representatives allowing that sequester to go away. Well, Senator Ted Cruz has been catching heat from the president and the media during the shutdown, but he's a hero to grassroots conservatives. John Jessup has that story from Washington. Here's John.
Conservative activists were in Washington this weekend to talk about Obamacare and other issues at the Values Voter Summit. Among those issues, the future of the Republican Party and its next presidential candidate. And as David Brody reports, Senator Ted Cruz was the winner of their straw poll.
The conservatives' latest rock star took center stage to the sound of applause and cheers from values voters, and then he took on a number of hecklers who repeatedly tried to interrupt his speech.
Thank you, sir, for being here. Ma'am, thank you for being here.
That's what happens when you lead the fight against President Obama's agenda, like Cruz has done since hitting Washington less than a year ago. After his speech, he told CBN News the Democratic Party planted those critics in the audience.
Do you believe that was an orchestrated event?
Oh, I think it clearly was. And you know, David, look, I actually am encouraged by that, as strange as that sounds. I'm encouraged by that because it shows that they are afraid. They're afraid of the thousands of men and women who are gathered there. They're afraid of the American people hearing the truth, and so they want to disrupt it.
But nothing disrupted the voting process here, and when the straw poll results came out, Cruz finished first by a mile. Taking a surprising second was Dr. Ben Carson, a frequent critic of Obamacare, who pushed it even further in front of this friendly values crowd.
Obamacare is really, I think, the worst thing that has happened in this nation since slavery.
The GOP is currently fighting about how to win as a party. The big question, whether to go more conservative or track to the middle. Senator Marco Rubio tells CBN News the fight over Obamacare has revealed a weakness for Republicans.
One of the reasons that's standing in the way of us doing better is that while people see Republicans fighting against certain things, they're not quite sure sometimes who we're fighting for, who we're fighting on behalf of.
So while Ted Cruz plays to standing ovations, some within his own party question whether the Obamacare fight was really worth it.
We gave the Democrats one incredibly early Christmas gift.
Former presidential candidate Mike Huckabee says shutting down the government allowed Democrats to blame Republicans for the stalemate instead of playing defense over the rollout of Obamacare.
I'm not going to fault Ted. He believed what he was doing was going to be helpful. But at the end of the day, you look and you ask, are we any closer to defunding Obamacare or ridding ourselves of it than we were? The answer is no.
Those strategy differences could be a preview of coming attractions in a 2016 presidential race, because Huckabee told us he's thinking about running.
Am I thinking about it? Am I talking to people about it? Yeah, that'd be fair to say.
It's also on the mind of Senator Rand Paul, who spoke to the crowd and also talked to CBN News about a private meeting with evangelical leaders.
To me, it's very important that we talk to people of faith. This country is founded by people of faith, and that we hear from them and that they have influence in government.
For now, though, all eyes are on Ted Cruz. While a presidential run could be in the cards, he's got his hands full right now, taking on the Obama administration and all those liberal critics. It leaves him doing one simple thing: praying.
Where do you see God in all of this fight that's going on in your life right now?
Well, David, you know, at every stage, my prayer to God is that His will be done, and as it will be.
All we can do now is wait for the rest of the story. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
While Washington is trying to figure out how to get a handle on its massive deficits, the rest of America is still going heavily into debt. CNBC reports that businesses, households, and students are all taking on more debt. Consumer credit is up 22% in the last 3 years to just over $3 trillion. Student loans are up 61%, and total household debt now stands at $13 trillion, just below the government's debt of $15 trillion. Meanwhile, a growing number of Americans say they're going to have to wait to retire after the recession a few years ago, and many say they'll still have to keep working. A new survey from the Associated Press finds 82% of working Americans over 50 say it's at least somewhat likely they'll have to do some work for pay after they retire, and 47% expect to retire later than they had previously thought. Experts say people have to make up for the lost money in their retirement plans when the markets plunged in 2008, and some people say it's hard to save for retirement because the cost of living is so high. Recovery efforts are underway from the massive cyclone that hit India this weekend. It was larger than Hurricane Katrina and stronger than Sandy. The Category 4 storm came ashore with 140-mile-per-hour winds. Thanks to a huge evacuation effort, the death toll is low so far, but hundreds of thousands are now homeless and the devastation is massive. CBN disaster relief teams are on the ground in eastern India trying to bring relief to those in need. Gary Lane has that story.
The storm left a trail of destruction in its wake. Torrential rains left many villages underwater. Mud and straw huts were leveled. The loss of life was minimal. So far, with only 17 deaths reported. Fewer people died in this storm than during the last major cyclone that hit the area in 1999. That's because government officials learned lessons from the past. This time, nearly 1 million people were evacuated from the area several days before Phelan hit. Power outages have isolated many towns. Crippled communications are making rescues difficult.
Primary concern at the moment is to look for survivors. Communication has been crippled.
Not much is left of the small coastal fishing village of Padampeta. Fishing boats were tossed into houses like unwanted play toys. This woman, Buchi Ama, says when she returned to the village from a local shelter, she found her home had been destroyed. I started crying, she said. I have nothing to eat but puffed rice. The cyclone wiped out tens of thousands of acres of crops. Many agricultural areas are now unusable, flooded with seawater. The worst effects of Cyclone Phelan will be felt in the days ahead. Homeless and hungry, tens of thousands of Indians will need help. The CBN India Disaster Relief Team is on the ground in Gopalpur, where the cyclone made landfall. They're serving up hot meals to victims and relief workers. Medical clinics are now operational, and tarpaulin sheets are being provided to people whose roofs have been damaged. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Pat, as Gary just reported, the real effect is in the days to come, and the need will surface then with much help and much assistance required for them to get back in.
There's no question. The last major cyclone that hit that area, 200,000 people died. It was a terrible tragedy. So they did take warning. They knew it was coming. This cyclone was as big as France. Just think of that. It was a monster. And it came off the Bay of Bengal. And so the property damage and the suffering of human life is terrible. So we've got a disaster team. I mean, I know it's small, but we're doing what we can. And you can help if you want to. CBN Disaster Relief Fund, 1-800-759-0700. So we have Operation Blessing on the one hand, we have CBN Disaster in certain parts of the world on the other. So we're trying to meet these tragedies and help people where we can. So if you want to participate, that's the address.
After nearly 1 year in prison, an American Christian in North Korea recently got to see his mother. 45-year-old Kenneth Bae was arrested last November and accused of hostile acts against the government. He is serving a 15-year sentence of hard labor. Bae has health problems and is currently hospitalized. In a video, Bae's mother, Myung-hee, is shown visiting him at a hospital where he's been held since August. The mother and son embraced and wept during their 90-minute visit. The visit does not guarantee his release. CBN is helping thousands of people affected by flooding in Thailand. In some areas, floodwaters reached 5 feet high. Residents were forced to flee their homes. CBN partnered with local churches to deliver relief packages full of rice, food, medicine, and water. So far, more than 1,000 families have been helped. CBN will continue relief efforts with a special focus on helping the elderly and children. And if you'd like to find out more about what CBN is doing around the world, you can do so by logging on to our website at cbn.com/international.